Well, good morning again for some of you, and good morning for the first time for some of you for this second webinar in our InsureCon virtual presentation. We're talking about the maturation phase of the disruption cycle, and we're working our way around the thing, and it's going to be a lot of fun. For those of you who were on the previous webinar presentation, know that the first couple minutes we're going to repeat some stuff because there are some new people that are joining us each time, but the bulk of the material is new. So don't be discouraged when you see that the next slide is you've already seen. As I said, we are in the maturation phase. We're trying to prevent our businesses from dying. As Sir George says here, the core of every business is dying. And so it's important and incumbent upon us as business leaders to ensure that we maintain perpetuity in our business. And in order to do that, we have to understand what's going on out there. Not only what's going on out there, but what's going on in here that is within our companies from a strategic and a cultural perspective. And so that's what really this presentation is about, taking the familiar, like the diffusion of innovations curve, and mixing it with the less familiar, like the various phases of the disruption cycle, and understanding how we naturally move from disruption to acceleration to maturation to saturation and commoditization, whether that takes 5 years or 50 years, depending upon what industry you're in. So we did complete the insurance industry disruption survey several months ago, before the world changed. I was talking with a client yesterday, and we're planning something about 6 weeks from now, and we're like, what could go wrong? Who knows? But we did the survey. We got some wonderful responses. And the good news is COVID and its attendant effects has had an impact on us all, and it does impact us all. It doesn't change any of these fundamental principles. It actually speeds them up, perhaps, and enhances them. So I would encourage you to, if you haven't already, go through your insurance industry disruption survey report. For those of you who weren't able to take the survey, if you'd like to, we can make arrangements for that. You could just contact Matt, and we'd be happy to have you do it. And you can get a nifty little PDF report like this one right here. Overall, this is how the IIAT membership broke out when it comes to the various phases of the cycle. So we had about half, well, it looks like it's exactly half on the left side of the wheel and half on the right side of the wheel. About a quarter in each. So it's a fascinating study. So I'm going to assume that many of you who are attending today are in maturation mode. You don't have to be. If you're in acceleration mode, you're headed for maturation. If you're in saturation and commoditization, you want to get back to maturation. So we're really going to focus on what goes on and what should be going on during this maturation phase. When I sent the reports to you, I sent these 3 questions with them. Why are we here? How did we get here? And where are we going? And that's a little bit about what we want to talk about for the next 45 minutes or so today. So maturation mode is an interesting place to be. In the last hour, we talked about how acceleration are the salad days, the good old days, the fun times, and that's really true. Well, maturation mode is equally fun for different reasons. In maturation mode, you're crushing it. You're achieving your objectives, you're growing into the market, often you're expanding into new markets or new customer segments or new product lines. Your competitive differentiation is growing, you have pricing and margin power. You're probably seeing some competitors enter the marketplace, copycat or me too, or you could be the copycat or me too to someone else's. But the mode is growth. Customers are happy, loyalty is coming. You're getting more sophisticated as an organization, at least you should be. And this is when you're, making money. Maturation mode can last for a short period of time. If you're Apple and you make smartphones or smartwatches, it's going to be pretty short. If you're in other categories, it could be somewhat long. But as we did for the acceleration mode, we want to talk about 5 specific things to look for and do and manage when a company is in maturation mode. And the first one probably won't surprise you, and that is make hay while the sun shines, because it's not going to shine forever. So this is you're achieving your marketing objectives. You've got some cash to spend on marketing and R&D and staff and bonuses and those sorts of things. If you're advertising, you can afford to hire professionals, and your design is getting better, so you might be winning awards. This is a good time. Companies in maturation mode are the most likely to say that their creative has won industry awards. And this you might think is kind of an unusual question. We asked it in the original survey because that is our background. We began as an advertising agency years ago, and we noted that over the course of the past 20 or 30 years in particular, an increasing body of research has come out that shows that creativity actually tracks with effectiveness. And there's reasons for that. Typically, when something is creative, it's different. And when it's different, it's more likely to capture people's attention. And when it captures people's attention, they're more likely to receive the message. So it's sort of common in the past for companies to say that's not really important, but it is. And awards, while they're not terribly important in and of themselves, they are a recognized way of recognizing creativity, if you will. So they're a proxy for how creative your advertising is, and in that sense, they can be valuable. When you're in maturation mode, it's not that revenue is more important than profit right now. Again, when we get to commoditization this afternoon, we're going to look at why that's so high. But in maturation, you're least likely of the 4 cycles to be able to say revenue is more important than profit, because revenue's coming in, and wisely you recognize that now is the time to be reaping what you've sown. Profit is really important. If you look at the business cycle here, maturation mode is right there in growth and maturity, where sales are growing, cash flow should be growing positive, you should be banking money, making money, setting it aside. And there's different ways to set it aside. Of course, you can do distributions, which is important because you take a lot of risk as a business owner and you want to set it aside personally. You can also set it aside in the form of, well, certainly cash flow in your checking and savings account, but also in the form of research and development, also in the form of education and training. That's setting aside your cash. That's investing it in the future, and that's what you want to be doing in this mode. So I can't underscore this enough. We don't know how long the sun is going to shine. Some of you during COVID are actually probably doing really well still. Some of you might be feeling the pinch. Our own prognostication, if you will, at our firm is that we're really going to start to feel it economy-wide in the fall, because with the PPP program and extended unemployment benefits, people have been kind of okay. And the analogy we've given is the economy caught a cold called COVID. And what we've done is we've taken a bunch of cold medicine in the form of unemployment and PPP. So it's masking the symptoms. And we're all going about our business and we're thinking we're doing okay, when in reality, we're spreading the virus. And this is a metaphor. We're spreading the virus amongst other people. And when the cough medicine wears off, or the cold medicine wears off at the end of July, beginning of August, September, we're really going to feel sick. That may be true of our economy. So make hay while the sun shines in the short term during COVID, and also in the long term, because it will not shine forever. Point number 2 about maturation related to making hay is investing in those systems and processes, being careful not to squish your culture. This is why we called it maturation mode, is because it's time for companies to mature as they grow. So you're getting, customer loyalty and customer value. That's really working for you, operating pretty well. But it's that last line there that betrays itself. It's the last line, but it tends to be a big thing, that we're outgrowing our internal systems, or perhaps we've never had internal systems and we need to grow into them. The biggest business challenge for companies in maturation mode is time. Time. Of course, you see talent and people, personnel, those are all related to similar things. But as with acceleration mode, you're being stretched to the limit, you're being challenged, and time is of the essence. And one way to overcome time challenges is through systems and processes. You might be expanding, as we said, into new geographies, either within your marketplace or elsewhere, might be into new product lines, new customer bases. All those things require time and coordination. So this is typically when companies invest in ERP software and those sorts of things, if you don't have it, where you're trying to find ways to find time. This is often in the phase where companies will invest in, a chief operating officer or a CFO or a CMO. And even if your company is too small to have those fancy, Fortune 500 titles, you're still going from maybe a bookkeeper, to a CPA kind of a thing, or from having no marketing director at all to hiring somebody to run the marketing function, if you will. And we always want to be careful, and this is where the cultural touchstone comes into it, is you can institutionalize your company to a fault, and that's a problem. And again, it's the art of leadership. You want to bring in software and processes and people, but not to the point where it quashes initiative and culture and enjoyment and fun and those sorts of things. Jay Chiat, who ran a famous advertising agency called Chiat Day, is famously quoted as saying, "How big can we get before we get bad?" And I think that's true from a cultural standpoint, and even a business efficiency standpoint. Is size is a good thing, but you want to be careful about it. So as we looked at the 4 graphs on the 4 internal dynamics in maturation mode, we see that, like acceleration mode in both on the agency member and associate member side, you're healthy. And why wouldn't you be, right? Because you're making your bonuses, you're winning in the marketplace. Disagreements across the conference table can be ignored or looked over, slights can be taken. And so you're doing pretty good, and you want to be careful about that. You just don't want to damage or to destroy it, because as we said in the last session, you're probably in the green because you're growing and you're doing pretty well. And so generally speaking, you're aligned and you have focus and conviction and consistency. But the forces of entropy will inevitably tug you towards the red. And in maturation mode, the next step is saturation, and it is inevitable. It's a market force that you can't stop by definition, because the extent to it, and it doesn't matter if you have intellectual property, or the extent to which you're succeeding, growing and profitable, you're going to attract flies. You're going to attract competitors who will begin to eat away at your margins. It's just enough. You can put it off, you can forestall it. There are defensive moves you can make, but it is coming. And so you want to be careful about that. I cited briefly at the end of the last session, the airline industry, where back in the day, that quaint little photo from the 60s or 70s on the left there, whenever that was taken, it was great. Airlines flying, the new frontier, America. It was wonderful. And today we've gotten to a point where the corporate culture within most airlines is just awful and destroyed. And the joke I often make is, when was the last time you flied the friendly skies of United? They haven't been friendly in a long time. It's Delta, actually, if you remember Delta's tagline, "We love to fly and it shows," they literally shortened that tagline to "We love to fly." I think it's because it didn't show. And I think they've abandoned it altogether now. So as you grow, watch the cultural bugaboos, invest in those systems and processes. And I've given that very short shrift because these are, top line webinars. This is the time to do it, because come saturation mode, you're really gonna be looking for efficiencies, but don't lose your culture, because you'll need it then. One of the dangers of being in maturation mode is a loss of focus. And we see this happen a lot. Your differentiation is growing, you're winning in the marketplace, you're having fun, and it's easy to get cocky. So a loss of focus can happen a couple of different ways. Companies in maturation mode tend to be in growth mode, right? So the nothing in the fearmost, the nothing that we saw big in the acceleration mode has kind of shrunk, because you get a little more realistic about the future, but you're still really focused on growth. And in some ways, it can feel like growth is just a birthright and it's gonna, keep coming. And there's a couple of ways that you can run into real danger with respect to that when it comes to maturation mode. And that is, Alan Addison and Brand Simple said it better than I ever could. There's a disconnect between the business strategy and the brand idea. This happens one of 2 ways, typically. Way number 1 is you get hit with a tectonic event, what we like to call a tectonic event, which COVID is a tectonic event, right? It's like an earthquake. It shakes everybody. It was unanticipated. It was unexpected. The protests and the riots are a different tectonic event that might not be affecting your business, or they might be affecting it greatly. A recession is a tectonic event. That can knock a company off its moorings, and you start to look for growth in areas where you wouldn't normally look for it. So that's the first way you lose focus. Either you start compromising your pricing strategy, or you start offering products and services that you normally wouldn't, or you start pursuing clientele that you normally wouldn't. And it can knock you off your base to the point where one day you wake up and you say, we're not the company we think we are. So that's one way that companies get their business strategy gets disconnected from their brand idea or their mission. The other way is at the opposite end of the spectrum, and that's pure cockiness, pure arrogance. When you start to think that you can do no wrong, and it happens a lot, believe it or not. The best example in recent years that I can give you is this company called Under Armour, which when you think about it, was pretty remarkable. Nike, you had Adidas that has been around forever. Nike's basically been around forever, dominate the marketplace, brilliant competitors. And here comes Under Armour and says, we're going to get into that business. You're nuts, right? They get into the business, they carve out a special niche targeting really high school athletes as opposed to, professional and college and adults. And the Protect This House thing and Under Armour and the whole urban vibe. And they carve out this really fabulous niche. And then they get cocky and they say, we're going to expand our distribution out of Dick's Sporting Goods and Ultimate Athletics and those and we're going to go into Kohl's because Kohl's has a great distribution line. And I'll never forget the day that I saw them announce this. I said, what are you guys doing? You're getting kind of cocky there. You're trying to reap more than you can sow. And the simple reason is Under Armour is targeted at the urban high school athlete who shops at Kohl's, but his or her mother. And that's not cool. And sure enough, it wasn't long before Under Armour was had its tail between its legs and was basically apologizing, not only because their loyal supply chain partners like Dick's Sporting Goods were offended by it, but from a branding and marketing and positioning standpoint, it just didn't fit. And so this is an example of a great company that got cocky and lost its focus. And if you know anything about what has happened since then, now Under Armour, as with all of us, has been hit by a tectonic event. And now they're suffering from a lack of focus for two reasons. So it's different in every industry. It's different in your business, depending on what you're doing and what you're offering to where, to whom. But I would encourage you to really be careful about getting knocked off your game, losing your focus, either through arrogance or carelessness. Point number 4. This is probably the biggest one for this one, and that is last time we talked about beginning to codify your culture. Now we're talking about codifying your brand equity. If you do one thing during the maturation phase, do this thing. If I see one mistake that companies make during this phase, it's not doing this thing or not doing this thing well. What am I talking about when I say codify your brand equity? You're expanding into new markets. You're growing. Things are going well. But there's something that you need to realize, that you can't separate your business from your brand. And sometimes companies in acceleration and maturation mode, they don't really think in terms of brand necessarily, because they're focused on the business. And initially, the business does drive or define the value of the brand. What I mean by that is, let's take it out of the realm of insurance. Let's go to the restaurant industry. We can all kind of identify with that. You start a new restaurant, you're not really thinking about your brand. You're thinking about your menu and your decor, and your environment and your wait staff and those sorts of things. And you put a good combination of offerings together, and people come in and they like it, and you do a good job, and your chef is wonderful and so forth. They go out and they start telling people about how good your restaurant is. Okay, your business is beginning to define the value of your brand. You do a good job with your products and services, and you get a good reputation. That's what happens in acceleration and early stages of maturation mode. But what you need to realize is that the brand can also drive the value of the business, and you're going to need it to. It's going to be required to when you get to saturation mode. And so now is the time to build it. The Economist, which is no fly-by-night organization, says that brands account for more than 30% of the stock market value of companies. Pause for a minute and think about that. More than 30% of the market capitalization of companies is their reputation, codified. And you can either let your reputation kind of be what it is, or you can actively manage it. 3/5 of CEOs think that the brand is worth more. They think it's worth 40% of the company's market caps. And in this environment, with all the cultural change that's raging all around us, people's willingness to buy, recommend, work for, that's an important one, your staff, and invest in a company is driven by their perceptions of your reputation. So neglecting to intentionally codify your brand borders on malpractice, and you want to be careful about it. No better example than a little bitty company called IBM that went through 5 years of consecutive quarterly sales declines. You can see it right there, 5 years. 3 quarters of growth, 3 more quarters of decline. I think last quarter they eked out a little bit of growth. IBM has really been struggling. Could your company go through 5 years of consecutive sales declines? Probably not. Why could IBM? Because IBM has earned the trust of the marketplace. There's a group called Interbrand that does a global brand valuation analysis, and they tag the value of brands. You can see the Apple brand they say is worth $184 billion. Wow. Coca-Cola is worth $69 billion. Wow. That's the value of the brand or the corporate reputation as distinguished from the products and services of the organization. Whether we get into all the details or not, we know that the brands are worth a lot of money. You can see the IBM 10th most valuable brand in the world, but in the most recent Interbrand study, the IBM brand declined by 11%. Of course it did, because people are questioning IBM. What are you guys doing? Sales declines. But because IBM had the brand equity to burn, because for 100 years it had been building that equity, it's able to survive 5 years of growth declines. And this is why I'm saying it's so important. IBM's customers trust it. They're willing to give it some time to right the ship. IBM's staff and employees trust it. They're willing to give it some time before they jump ship. IBM investors, the investment analyst community says, what are you guys doing? But they trust it, that it's a well-managed company. And so there are times you build equity, there are times you burn equity. On the right side of the disruption cycle in saturation and commoditization mode, you're going to be burning equity. Now is the time to build it and to be very intentional about it. Your brand is unlike any other asset your company owns, and that is that it can continually appreciate. And when we talk about your brand, I do tend to talk about it in terms of your company, and that may be appropriate. But products have brands and services have brands as well. So whether it's a product or service in the context of your company, or a product or service that's standalone, or your company that's standalone, the point is still the same. The brand is unlike any other asset you own because patents expire, key staff leave, prices are duplicable, right? Technologies age, but a brand can continually appreciate. It can go up in value year after year after year after year. So see in the case of IBM, they don't, because you need to burn equity sometimes, but they can. And that's why you want to invest in it. What is a brand? It's your reputation. If you're more comfortable using that term, that's fine. It's a mental shortcut that discourages rational thought. I love this. I love the way that this professor talked about it, John Sherry. Discourages isn't the best word, but it is. It's a mental shortcut that enables you not to have to process so much information. Best story I could tell you about this is a true story from my life. Last time I bought a television, I went to Best Buy because I didn't want to buy one online. And as you know, when you go to a place like Best Buy, you see a wall of televisions, just a wall. And there's a gazillion of them. And so what do most people do? It's too much choice. What most people do is they will first filter by price, which I did. I didn't want to buy the most expensive TVs, so I ruled them out. I didn't want to buy the cheapest TVs, so I ruled them out. Now I'm down to about a dozen. And I looked at the dozen and I said, I don't like the looks of the cabinet on that one, and I don't like the picture on that one. And for whatever reason, I ruled it down. And I got down to 2 TVs, and these are the 2 that you're looking at right here. And they were, I think, like catty corner on the shelf from one another. And they had the same image on them. So, I mean, the picture quality you could compare. And I'm sitting there stroking my chin, looking at them. I'm sure they thought I was an idiot, you know, at Best Buy. And it felt like 20 minutes. It was probably 3. And I'm looking at them and I'm going, which one? I can't decide. They were about $10 apart in price. So in the context of a TV, it didn't matter. And I said, which one? I couldn't decide until I looked a little closer. And if you can see here, one of these TVs says Dynex and one of them says Toshiba. Now, the question I'll ask you is the question I ask every audience. And even though I can't hear you, I know what you're going to say. The question is, which one did I buy? No one has ever answered that question incorrectly. That I did. I bought the Toshiba television. Why? because it was a mental shortcut that discouraged rational thought. I didn't know a lot about Toshiba, I still don't, but I know it's been around for a long time, and I know it's a big brand, and it gave me some assurance of quality. I later learned, interestingly enough, that Dynex is the house brand of Best Buy. Had I known that, I actually might have made a different decision, because the Best Buy reputational umbrella, since the TV might have to get fixed, might have overcome the Toshiba reputational umbrella. The point is simply this: we do this all the time as consumers, right? We do it all the time. We use brands as a shortcut to rational thought. And there's a very deliberate way, and I don't want to get into all the details because we simply don't have time, but there's a very deliberate way you need to build brand equity, and this is what you do during the maturation phase. And the way I like to describe it is in the context of what we call the journalist six. You all are familiar with it, even if you don't know that term. That there's a who, what, when, where, why, and how to every story. And so your company or your product, your services story is its brand, its reputation. That's one way of looking at it. And if you're going to tell a story, you have to cover the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So if you're a reporter writing a story about a bank robbery, who robbed the bank, what bank did he rob, when did he rob it, why did he rob it, those sorts of things, right? If you're telling the story about an Olympic event, what was the event, who won the event, when did the event happen, how did they win it, those sorts of things. Anytime there's a story being told, you need the who, what, when, where, why, and how. In journalism, in a novel, in a movie, it really doesn't matter in what order these things are developed. They just have to be developed. When you're codifying your brand, it matters a great deal. So much so that I wrote an entire book about it called Power Branding, which is the case I made was you need to attack the journalist six in this order: the why, the who, the what, then the where, when, and how. And I just want to briefly give you a sense of this so I can convince you of not only its importance, but how to go about it. We begin with the why, and that is the context in which you're operating. And that's what I've really been talking about, is why do you need to build your brand equity from a marketplace standpoint? It's because of the disruption cycle. It's because you're going to need to be able to draw it down. From an individual business standpoint, this relates to your mission and this relates to your vision, and you really want to understand the why. You will be heading into saturation mode where you will be one of those two TVs on the shelf, figuratively speaking, and you will want people to choose you, and you want them to choose you because of what you mean to them, because of what your reputation is in the marketplace. I dare say that, let me just say this at the risk of losing friends, your industry is terrible about this. Not so much on the insurance company side, which does a lot of advertising to try and build that reputation, but in the independent insurance agent side, independent insurance themselves, it's a terrific brand, and that's why IIAT, it's a terrific brand because it's been built over a very long period of time. But your brand within the context of that, and I'm not speaking to anybody individually, obviously, because I don't know you, but generally speaking, wildly untapped, very, very much untapped. And so this is an opportunity for you to really draw some differentiation, beginning with the who. Who's going to help us achieve our goals? Who's going to ring our bells? And the who is very different. I don't know if you've thought much about this. This is one of my favorite billboards that I've seen driving around, because it's funny. It's just funny. You know what they're targeting here, right? McDonald's is sort of giving the finger to Starbucks and its snooty customers here. Why is this such a great billboard? Because Starbucks customers are not McDonald's customers, and McDonald's customers are not Starbucks customers, certainly when it comes to coffee, right? And McDonald's has an inside joke going here with its customers that, yeah, we're smarter than those silly people who pay $4 for a cup of coffee. And they might be offending Starbucks customers, but they don't care, because McDonald's knows who its who is. When you can define the target that way, see, that's what it enables you to do. On the flip side, if you ask Starbucks people if Starbucks is worth the price, they'll say, yeah. And they'll say, those McDonald's people, they don't understand that I'm not just, first of all, the coffee's better. I'm not a coffee drinker, but presumably this is what Starbucks people would say. The environment's better. I get treated like a human being, not hard plastic chairs, whatever it is. McDonald's has its peeps. Starbucks has its peeps. They don't overlap a lot, and they both know their customer, and that's why they both succeed. So when you're asking the who, it's not, it's the difference between the business you'll seek and the business you'll take. And this is an important corollary. You can take anybody's business. And if somebody comes to you and wants help with their protection, you'll take care of them. This is about the business you'll seek, because you don't have unlimited resources to seek everybody's business. So you want to narrow your target. You want to narrow it along a certain dynamic. In the case of BMW, a very highly competitive category, not just cars, but luxury cars, BMW, Lexus, Mercedes, Infiniti. They've narrowed their who to people who want to feel the rumble of the road in the seat of their pants, right? The ultimate driving machine. There's a whole lot to that story, but that's it in a nutshell. It's a key desire among a key demographic that BMW has narrowed in on. Coke and Pepsi in commoditized categories, it's all about emotion. It's an emotional driver, and we can get into those case studies. I'm going to talk a little bit about them in a bit. In the case of Walmart, it's a felt need, right? Their target, the way they describe their who is people who live paycheck to paycheck, who need cheap stuff. That's what it is. So it's a felt need. I need cheap stuff. Whereas Target, their target audience, they define differently. It's a more affluent, middle income female who doesn't want to spend more than she has to, but wants a little bit more respect or style. The whole Target thing. So you've got, a great case study, which we're going to talk about in a minute, of two different brands that have very different target audiences, and that's where they diverge. But first, I want to talk about, Mountain Dew, which is a fabulous case study. For those of you who are old enough, you may remember Mountain Dew in the 1960s and 1970s was launched as a hillbilly soft drink, Mountain Dew, right? Like the still. And their slogan was Yahoo Mountain Dew, if you remember this. And they had hillbillies swinging from rope swings into the pond. Yahoo Mountain Dew. And it was great. And it was wonderful. And it was 24th in market share, 24th, until they decided to narrow their target audience. And they created something that we now know today as Dew Dudes, right? The young ex-gamer, anti-establishment, counterculture type. Mountain Dew focused on a very narrow slice of the market, and in so doing became 4th in market share, from 24th to 4th. Kind of counterintuitive, but the narrower your target, the greater the intensity of your appeal to that target. It gives you pricing power. It gives you market power. It differentiates you. Your brand can differentiate you even as your competitors are mimicking your features and your benefits and your price. That's what's so important about these things. I talked about Target and Walmart. They sell the same stuff. If I gave all of you a shopping list and told half of you go to Target and half of you go to Walmart, you'd come back and unpack your bags and have literally the same basket of goods. You'd have Tide detergent in the same box. You'd have Kleenex tissues in the same box, Pampers diapers in the same box, and whatever else that was on that shopping list in the main part of the store. Walmart and Target literally sell the same goods at the same price, basically, 1 or 2% difference. The difference is in the experience. And the experience diverges because they're serving a different clientele. They define their who differently, and that changes everything. That's why I want to underscore this here. You will take the business of anybody who you want to serve. You can't seek the business of everybody. I know you know this intuitively. I'm just underscoring it. So you need to define your who, and there's a whole bunch of ways to do that. The next question in codifying your brand is, what is it? And there's a little term there like créneau. If you've ever read any of the classic books by Trout and Reese on brand positioning, they talk about finding the hole, chercher les créneaux. I don't know if I say that right. Finding the hole in the marketplace and filling it. What is your what? What is your unique what? And being an independent insurance agent is a unique what versus a non-independent insurance agent. But there's a whole lot more room in there. There's a whole lot of more opportunity to explore what that exactly means. And as Tom Friedman here says, there's nothing wrong with a complicated idea, but you got to boil it down to its essence. And insurance protection is a complicated idea. It gets really complicated really fast. That's why I need you to consult with me. It's a complicated idea, but you have to boil it down to its essence, or as I like to think of it, you have to put it on the stove and put it on simmer and reduce it to a very flavorful stock. That's what we're looking for. So a great example, go to the car industry. One way to describe a car is functionality. And so this is an actual car functionality that's listed here. This is kind of a fun exercise to do in person, but since we're not in person, we'll just do it on Scout's honor here. Tell me what make and model of this car it is. I think in all the time I've used this example, one person has, and that's a pretty nerdy person. That if from the functionality you can tell me what make and model this car is, you know, it's near impossible to do. First of all, because a lot of this stuff is technical. I don't even know what it means. I'm not a car guy. But I can tell you the engineer that worked on that compression ratio thinks it's all about that. Whether you got it from 11.1 to 11 or 10.9 to 11, I don't know which one is better. He's like, that's what we need to sell this thing on. It's like, no, it doesn't mean anything to people. It's just a bunch of functions. You offer a bunch of very valuable functions to your marketplace. It's not what it's what your reputation is built on, but it's not what you go to market on. Okay, let me make it easier for you. Same car. This is features. This is consumer-friendly features, right? Now, as you start to look at these things, you go, well, all right, I'm beginning to get a picture, a little fuzzy, but a picture. This is probably not a giant truck or something, you know, of what kind of car this is. And this is where most companies who have not codified their brand live, in the features and benefits world. So if your website has a bunch of bullet points on it, you failed. That's too strong a statement. We have a saying in our business, bullets kill. What that means is that bullet points kill comprehension, because every time you use a bullet point, every time you read a bullet point, you have to stop and interpret it before you move on to the next bullet point. Stop and interpret it before you move. So it's slow, painful process versus a well-written paragraph or two, which flows and helps people to kind of ease their way through it. So we always recommend that. If I wouldn't ask you to evaluate this automobile based on these bullet points, if this was a magazine ad, you would have already turned the page. It's just too much. You can't take it all in. Now, there does come a time in the purchase process when you do. So if I get your attention and you go to the website and you're comparing vehicle to vehicle, you will do this. So there's a place for a lot of information, but not on the homepage of your website, right? When you get to policy prescriptions, you got to communicate a lot of information. So the point, I showed you the functionality of the car, tell me the make and model. Now I'm showing you the features of the car. You might be able to guess, but you still probably can't, because a lot of cars have a lot of these features. And so it's still not differentiating. But now if you take it up yet another notch and you say, of all the cars out there, this is the one where, you know, middle-aged people who want to relive their youth put the top down and zip around town and have a lot of fun. Now it's starting to get really, really narrow. And usually when we do this exercise in a group of people, somebody always guesses correctly that we're talking about the Mini Cooper. In fact, funny story, I got picked up at the airport one day in Memphis, Tennessee, by a lady in a Mini Cooper. I'd never been in one before. It's bright yellow Mini Cooper, and she fit the profile right. She was the right age. She had the right look. Personality-wise, I'm just like, okay, she fits this car. And I asked her, we're driving, and I said, how do you like your car? And she looked at me. She said, this car is so fun. But there you go. When you have a very well codified brand identity, you can do very well targeted, very powerful communications. So here's Mini, which took the worst form of advertising that everybody loves to hate, billboards, and they made it a reward. You want to drive past this billboard again. Like, what was that I just saw? Because it's fun. And they have 2 words on here, but I dare say they don't need any words on here. And Mini has done a fabulous job in a saturated market of maintaining its differentiation and its pricing power, because Mini knows who it is. Mini knows what it is. Compare that to a lot of the American car makes, Fords and Chevys, where it's like, what's a Ford and what's a Chevy? That's the difference in building brand equity. So the great brands of the world, they build themselves around an idea. Coca-Cola hasn't sold caramel colored sugar water in years. And this is your encouragement as you get into saturation and commoditization. You can differentiate based on an idea, not based on product and features, if you're intentional about it. Coca-Cola's done it with happiness. Have a Coke and a smile. Polar bears on the Super Bowl. You get the idea. Nike, just do it. They don't sell athletic apparel. They sell an idea. They sell a concept. They sell an emotional connection. And they get me so fired up that I stand up and I say, I'll do it. I need some gear. Where can I get some gear? And start looking around. Oh, Nike. That's how it works. They're differentiating in commoditized categories based on an idea. I've talked about Starbucks. You've probably not heard this term, the third place. That's what Starbucks committed to 30 years ago. They said home is the first place. Work is the second place. We're going to be the third place. So they put in comfortable furniture. So they were the first to offer free Wi-Fi. So they pay their baristas more and offer them college scholarships because they want them to know your name. They encourage you to stay. They broke all the retail restaurant conventions of uncomfortable seats, cold air conditioning, harsh lighting. because they want to turn the tables. Starbucks flipped that all on its ear. And oddly enough, they say, we want you to hang out here for 3 or 4 hours at a time. And if you've ever done that, it feels kind of weird. But they have become the third place. If you're traveling and you can't check into a hotel and you're between meetings, you know you can go to a Starbucks and you can set up camp there. They've done it. They built themselves on an idea. It's true of business to business, I want to assure you, because I know a lot of your business is serving corporate clients. GE is a lot more complicated company than you are. And for 20 years, they built their brand around imagination. Similarly with International Paper, a client of ours, with a brand idea that at first blush seems kind of lame and boring. But if you know their who and you know the company, it's perfect. It's spot on. And we even work with a company that makes extruded plastic milk crates and crates that you put strawberries in to get them from field to market. And trash cans, the big trash cans that you wheel out to the curb, they make all these kinds of things. Talk about a commodity, petroleum-based extruded plastic stuffs. Unless you realize that you're not in the business of forming petroleum into plastic, you're in the business of transporting strawberries from field to market without breakage or damage. You're in the field of physics. That's your brand idea. Now it elevates the company. Now it elevates your pitch. Now it elevates your pricing capabilities. I hope I'm communicating to you the power of codifying your brand. It's not what you want to say, that's details. It's what are you? What do you represent? Again, part of the issue I think is a lot of that you've been blessed with ambiently, because so much insurance marketing way up here works on the core, the core reason why you need to be protected. And then so much of what groups like IIT do and just independent insurance, that whole brand is a wonderful umbrella over you. So you have these two beautiful umbrellas, but your independent agency has a ton of latent power, immense latent power to withstand the force of saturation and commoditization if you codify your brand. And then you get to the where, when, and how, and we don't have time today for me to spend a lot of time on that, but that's the details of how you go to market with it, whether it's through advertising channels or entirely through your sales force or through a digital online capability, or some mix of the above. All that stuff is actually a lot more simple and straightforward to do once you address the big questions. So sorry to kind of go off on a tangent on that, but this is in acceleration mode. One, you're trying too much stuff, you're iterating, and so you really can't pin anything down. It's not really appropriate at that stage. And in saturation mode, you got to start burning equity. Now's the time to build it. So if you are in maturation mode, if anything I've said grabs you, don't ignore that. Write it down. Figure out a way to begin to codify and build your brand equity. Okay. The last point that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, because we're going to get into this afternoon, and I don't want this to be too duplicative, is to begin to consider your succession plans. For some of you, that might be obvious because it just coincidentally, you've got your successor in place, or you are the successor. For others of you, it might be kind of odd because you're like, well, we're still, we're growing really fast. I'm not ready to leave the company. That's my point. You're embarking on uncharted territory. You're making things happen. You can see there's two phases where that really is the case. One is sort of a positive uncharted territory, like new markets. This is kind of exciting. One is a negative, like what are we going to do? Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? But mergers and acquisitions start to come up during this time phase, and I would sort of lump that together in the succession question is ownership and who's going to run the thing. It's an important question. Again, I won't spend a lot of time on it this morning. We'll do that this afternoon to consider your plans, because succession really should be a decade-long proposition. Obviously, it can be done in less time, and obviously it can be done in more time. In a family-owned business, it's sort of a lifetime thing. But you should really be deliberate about succession for anywhere between 5 and 10 years, and which means you need to start thinking about it before you think you need to start thinking about it. So Not a big heavy burden on you now, but it's something that if you're in maturation mode, you might want to be like, okay, I got 10 or 15 or 20 more years, or however many you think you have, or the company might, but what's going to happen then? It's the right question to ask at the right time. What's going to happen then? Okay, threw a lot at you. Maturation is a terrific time. Make your money, invest your money, build your equity, beware arrogance. Really beware arrogance, because that will take you down as a company, and consider your succession plans. And last time we sort of summed it up with the word enjoy. Enjoy the acceleration mode. I think I would sum up the maturation mode with this word equity, that you're reaping equity, like financial equity. You're building equity into your systems and processes and training and staff and R&D and that sort of a thing. And you're codifying, you're building brand equity because you're going to need to reap it. So maturation time is the time to enjoy and build your equity. That's what this phase is really all about. Might last for 6 months, might last for 6 years, might last for 60 years, probably not 60 years. You don't know when it's going to end, so build equity while you can. Okay, that's the maturation phase. Coming up next, we have saturation, which is at 1 o'clock, but we have a little bit of time left, so I'm going to turn it back over to Matt to handle our Q&A if we have any.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Steve?
Yes.
Okay, let me see. Nothing came in on the chat. If anybody has a question, you can raise your hand in the little dashboard, and I can unmute you to hear you if you have a question. I am not seeing anything at the moment, Steve.
Very good. Well, thank you all for attending this. For those of you who are going to be joining us for the next one, we're looking forward to it. And appreciate your time and attention this morning. Thank you.